Meanwhile, let's talk about this now. The latest coronavirus death toll remains high. 413 people have died from COVID-19 complications in the last 24 hours. On the other hand, infections are down, and that's promising. Just over 12,000 people have tested positive countrywide. CSIR senior researcher Ridwan Suleiman spoke to eNCA earlier on.
Nationally, we have peaked. We are on a downward trend for the past 2 weeks. Over the last week, we're averaging just over 12,000 new cases per day across the country, and that figure is down about 19% week on week, primarily driven by Gauteng, which has peaked by all indicators, including hospitalizations and deaths in Gauteng, are all on a downward trend, which is promising. All of the neighboring provinces of Gauteng are also on a downward trend, so they seem to all have peaked as well. Unfortunately, we're not quite out of the woods just yet, because a peak means the highest point, so the infection rate still remains high. And in the coastal provinces, we're still seeing slight increases, albeit at a much slower rate.
South Africa's economy has suffered since the COVID-19 outbreak in March 2020. Recent mass looting has also added to the pressure. Business owners are waiting to hear if President Cyril Ramaphosa will announce the lifting of some regulations that affect the economy. Let's speak to Cas Coovadia from Business Unity South Africa about this. A blanket question to start off with, Cas Coovadia. Your expectations from President Cyril Ramaphosa this evening, are we likely to see an unchaining of the economy, or are we likely to see, I don't know, a bit of a squeeze once again in as far as the regulations are concerned?
Thanks for having me, and hi to your viewers. Look, I think we've seen in the last couple of weeks COVID infections go down, although deaths remain fairly high. But COVID infections have gone down. We have ramped up the vaccination program, and we will continue to ramp that up in the coming weeks as we bring on stream more vaccination sites. And it appears that the supply side, we are beginning to get that sorted. So I think given that, I think the President has the space to lift some of the restrictions a bit. I think particularly on the alcohol industry, which is currently on its knees, and not just the industry itself, but the entire value chain, the glass producers and others. So we would certainly expect the President to lift some of those restrictions and allow controlled sale of alcohol. We believe that restrictions on gatherings need to remain. I think that where there's possibilities of spreads of the virus and those areas of activity that can cause spread, I think those should still be controlled. But the reduction in the number of people getting the virus, the fact that we're ramping up the vaccination campaign, I think does give him some space to reduce the restrictions slightly.
I imagine that you must have been consulted ahead of this, either by the President directly over and above the meetings that were taking place last week following the violence and looting with various sectors of business. But I imagine that as Business Unity South Africa, you must have been consulted. How did that consultation go? What were the main issues that you raised, and what kind of reception did you receive?
Outside of our regular interactions between Business for South Africa and the Director General of Health and his team, which we meet twice a week at the moment, we haven't had any formal engagements. The President hasn't formally contacted BUSA to consult. In the engagements with the Director General and his team, which are focused on business supporting the National Department of Health in getting the vaccine rollouts up to scale and bringing more sites onto stream. We've both agree that the vaccination program has ramped up. We both, NDOH and ourselves, agree that we will continue to ramp up, and in the next few weeks we will probably get to about 400,000 vaccinations a day. So that's the only interaction we've had with government. We haven't been asked to any formal consultations by the President or his team on the address tonight. But we think that there is a space for him to actually move on this. I was part of a large group of CEOs that met with the President last week, Thursday, but that was primarily on the, as you say, don't know whether we can call it unrest. The President has publicly said that it's instigators trying to cause some sort of destabilization. We would agree with that. And at that meeting, Busa was of the view that we now need to, the President has publicly acknowledged that it's destabilization, acknowledged that there have been weaknesses in the state, both in intelligence and in the security services, and acknowledged that there are suspects, 12 or so suspects. And what we indicated is that, and if that's possible even in the address tonight, that the President actually briefs the public on what sort of decisive steps have been taken to bring about some sort of accountability for the shortfalls. We indicated that we stand ready as business to assist government from a technical viewpoint and capacity viewpoint, capability viewpoint to plug some of those holes, but ultimately law and order and security and intelligence is the government's domain, but we are prepared to assist. And I think what we would like to see in that regard is some strong and decisive announcement from the President that people are being called to account and that the government is moving swiftly to actually address our security and intelligence shortfall so that we are prepared for any further actions by a group of people that seem bent on destabilizing the country.
That's hugely important. If we stay with that point a bit more, Cas Coovadia, that's hugely important, I would suggest, given that, you know, the scale of the destruction in as far as what the provincial government, for example, in KwaZulu-Natal, has been able to quantify, some 20 billion rand in terms of damage, 15 billion rand worth of damage to property and equipment, some 1.5 billion rand worth of stock that is said to have been lost, and now over 100,000 jobs on the line. That sense of security, in addition to certainty in as far as policy is concerned, and the reforms that we've been talking about, I would imagine that for the sector that you represent, for the lobbying that you've been involved with to show South Africa as an attractive investment destination, that sense of being able to instill and maintain law and order is hugely important.
It's critical. Look, we've been fortunate. We haven't seen any significant pullbacks on investment. I think investors and even potential investors are taking the view that they're waiting and looking at how we respond to this. And that's why I think that probably the most critical message government can send out right now, particularly on the back of the statement by the President that this was not a sort of normal unrest, this was not just people looting, this seemed to be an organized effort by instigators to actually destabilize the country. On the back of that statement, I think what investors would be looking for is decisive action from government to ensure the instigators are brought to book, to ensure that our intelligence and security services are primed and are ready for any further such actions, and that people who were responsible for some of the shortfalls in government are brought to account. I think that's what investors would be looking for at this point in time. And then I think that we need to pull together to address the impact of the looting and the destruction of property and so on. As you say, KwaZulu-Natal, 20 billion rand. So the damage is probably in the vicinity of that, but higher than that. I think that business is coming together to actually start to rebuild. Lots of humanitarian efforts have been put into place to address food shortages, medical shortages. We need to rebuild some of the private vaccination facilities in KwaZulu-Natal, in Durban in particular, that were destroyed. So all of that is ongoing now.
Yeah.
But I think that we need a very decisive message from the President that we are going to deal with these instigators. We are going to sort out the weaknesses in government, in intelligence and the security services, including military and the police. And we will have a zero tolerance approach towards this, and we would call people to account.
Is it your sense, as a parting shot, Cas Coovadia, is it your sense that we've run out of rope, and run out of road, perhaps, in as far as putting off and kicking the can down the line and speaking the right language but not walking it? In as far as these matters are concerned, all these issues you and I have been talking about in the last few minutes, have we run out of road?
I think we were running out of road, and we had to stop kicking the can down the road quite a while ago. The COVID-19 exacerbated our situation. This exacerbates the situation, and look, we all believe in the President. We want to support the President. But we do need decisive leadership now. We need to start taking some of the hard decisions. And as we've said before, compromises and trade-offs will be necessary from business, from labor, from government. But we need to start having those hard discussions. We need to start seeing how we work together as critical stakeholders in this country, because no single stakeholder can do this. But we need to understand that the critical issues are attracting investment, and off the back of that, structuring inclusive growth so that the majority of our people have a stake in the economy, but that we do grow the economy. Without that, we can't actually address these issues.
Cas Coovadia, it couldn't be clearer. Thank you so much for your time this afternoon. Cas Coovadia is the CEO of Business Unity South Africa, weighing in on the expectations ahead of President Cyril Ramaphosa's address to the nation a bit later on. You heard it for yourself that actually he says it's time for decisive action. We can't keep kicking the can down the road. Interestingly,